Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a news update for the Ukraine war for the 9th of February 2023. Let's go straight to the Ukrainian official figures for Russian losses for the day before all the usual caveats. Accuracy, propaganda, Russia don't produce the same kind of figures, etc., etc. 910 liquidated personnel, that's high, well above average. Last 3-4 days have been terrible for the Russian losses. So this is indicative, remember. It might not be 100% accurate in terms of the number, but it's a case of seeing how bad the day before was compared to the kind of average. And yes, it was a bad day, another bad day for Russian force losses. 2 tanks, 10 APCs, 8 artillery systems, 2 MLRS, 4 anti-aircraft warfare systems. I think that's quite significant. 6 drones, 9 vehicles and fuel tanks. So fairly average across the equipment. Stats, but a bad day for troop losses. And talking about anti-aircraft system losses, you know, I do see an increased number of videos showing losses of air defense systems. And I think for the long-term goals of Ukraine in winning the war, obviously, they need to take out air defense systems so that they can get some kind of advantage in the air, which they don't have. It's fully contested. And evidence of a helicopter that was shot down that was on the list yesterday. There's video evidence of where it crashed. I don't know that you necessarily see it falling out of the sky. It's very difficult when you are attacking aerial targets. It's not like a tank that's there and in the distance and will be there for a long time because it doesn't move very fast or it's parked up. So you can get your mobile phone out or someone else can get their mobile phone out and record you with a manpad shooting that. When it comes to aerial targets, it's really quick. I showed you a video sometime recently, a few months back actually, with these guys with manpads watching out all day. And then you have to be ready within 5 seconds for that aircraft because fixed wing aircrafts are going pretty quickly, helicopters as well. So you're grabbing your manpad, you're targeting, and you've got this window of about 5 seconds to let off your missile. Now that doesn't really give you time to go, hang on, wait up, I need to get my mobile phone out to record it. So recording plane losses, you often see that from drone footage, not so much from sort of mobile phone footage. So the evidence for these is a bit thinner on the ground. But anyway, just thought I'd add that in. Right, Zelenskyy was in the UK and Europe doing his thing. I was attacked by some pro-Russian trolls on my threads yesterday. They were like, "Oh, stop fawning, stop being a fanboy, just grow up." It's like, oh, shut up. Honestly, you're just jealous, and you're jealous because, as I said, this guy's a statesman, and he's been a super successful statesman. No, he's not a statesman. He is a statesman. You look at what he has done for Ukraine, right? Over the last year, both in actions, but in words, and his speeches, and his demeanor, and the way he and his team have been able to create this image and this PR tour de force. Look at the way that he manipulates audiences with the way he presses these buttons. He talks about Churchill, talks about kings and aces and kings yesterday, and linking, flying with the royal family, which is very close connection there, and the military experience of the royal family. So, all these things where the audience of the British House of Parliament are like, yeah, brilliant, and they're like absolutely loving it. And then he says, "This is what I want. I want this, and this. Thank you very much, because I've got you all on board and I've captured you." I mean, this is statecraft, and he's just superb at it. You look at what he's done over the last year. 2 years ago, you wouldn't have known who Zelenskyy was. Maybe you involved in like the Trump Ukraine debacle, where he tried to sort of use a bit of bribery to get compromat. That Trump, that is, not Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy then was like the comedian president. Now look at him. You go and do some Google searches and compare him and the articles written on him and the articles written about Putin from non-state media. Right, and you will find this guy's on the front of magazines and newspapers, and everyone's saying how wonderful he is, right? And he does stuff like this. Like this is, which goes viral. This is how to be a statesman, which is getting what you want by showing yourself to be competent at what you're doing and having everyone like you enough to give you what you ask of them. So here is a press conference yesterday, and this, to me, this is prime Zelenskyy. BBC Ukraine. Hello, Mr. President. Thank you for coming. I would like to hug you and thank you. She says, sorry, I messed that up. Like to hug you and thank you, but I can't. Why? He says, come and hug me. Walks away from the lectern. Gives the Ukrainian journalist a hug. And everyone loves it. Everyone loves that. That goes viral. Shows his humanity. Does Putin ever show his humanity? Never. He's kissed a dead child's stomach, which then, like, that was weird, which made everyone think, oh, because there are rumors about him being a paedophile or having a whole range of sexual proclivities. And you're like, that's an odd thing to do. Whereas, Zelensky's hugging journalists who really respect him. It's just a huge difference between the two. So, you can attack me for saying whatever, being a fanboy of Zelensky. I was quite cynical about Zelensky yesterday. I was kind of being a fanboy in the sense that this guy is amazing at manipulating his audiences. Like, it wasn't like I'm not fawning over him in terms of like, oh, he's just wonderful. I'm saying he's brilliant at getting what he wants by manipulating his audience. That's a statesman. Now, the way that Putin manipulates his audience in a different way, he'll send in dogs with Merkel, but and make them fear him, and he's far more sinister. It's just two different ways of doing it, but one will put people on their guard and make them distrust and dislike you, and so you're afraid of Russia, and then it becomes this. Whereas Zelensky's the entire opposite end of the spectrum, which is makes everyone love him, and it's like this. Who's a better statesman? Well, at the moment, I would say it's a clear win for Zelensky. Zelensky visited the British military base in Bovington Camp. This is where, near our tank museum, where we have tank practices, not too far from Salisbury Plains, where we practice artillery and tank warfare and whatnot. I saw how Ukrainian crews are trained on the British Challenger main battle tank and other armoured vehicles, he wrote. And then you get these sort of pictures. And then, of course, this allows him to ask for air assistance, and it's very difficult for Sunak to say no. So Sunak says, this is from Shashank Joshi, sort of summarizing. He's the defense correspondent for The Economist. Sunak says Ukraine will be operating Challenger 2s by March. The Ukrainian crews who arrived last week will be using Challenger 2 tanks to defend Ukraine's sovereign territory next month. Maybe they will take part in an offensive after all, says Joshi, after quoting Sunak. London Declaration. So the UK reaffirms its unwavering commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its recognised borders, as well as Ukraine's right to pursue its own security arrangements, including future membership in NATO. The UK is working with Ukraine to help develop their longer-term force structures and capabilities to reverse Russian gains and build towards a deterrence force of the future. Now, this is interesting because that shows that there is a long-term goal for the assistance that the UK is giving to Ukraine. In 2023, it continues, the UK will train at least double the number of Ukrainian forces trained in 2022. And provide at least £2.3 billion in military aid, including more advanced capabilities. We will also ensure, consistent with our legal system, that Russia has no access to the assets we have frozen until it ends its violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We will pursue all lawful routes to ensure that Russian assets are made available. Emphasis on deterrence force of the future, says Joshi, is good and proper, but important not to forget the same long-term capabilities. Western tanks and combat aircraft may well be needed for continued fighting in 2024. Probability of high intensity warfare ending by next year is not high. So we're in this for the long haul, and it's good to see the UK committing to that. Now, the only thing with the UK is our own defence forces are somewhat beleaguered at the moment. We should be, historically speaking, the fact that we've got good tech and good training, it should be one of the best fighting forces in the world. But we've underfunded our defences, for good reason, because there's a competition for money in budgets. However, some things we spent money on could, arguably could be better spent, etc., etc., etc. We are tending to throw money at Ukraine by buying other equipment rather than giving our own, because we don't have enough of our own. Rishi Sunak is reportedly seeing what planes the UK can send to Ukraine. The answer may be none. Our old stock was sold to Germany years ago for parts. It's talking about the Tornado GR4 I talked about yesterday, or sit outside various RAF stations as monuments. We can offer excellent training on all modern models, though. So this is the idea that we are training the pilots. The offer has been to give them general training that can then be made bespoke after that on simulators and in the more abstract parts of training. So Justin Bronk, who writes for the Royal United Services Institute and has an expertise in air, uh, in all things air, on UK training Ukrainian Air Force pilots. No, this doesn't mean training on Typhoon. So that's a Eurofighter, the plane of choice really for the UK and Europe at the moment, or that the UK will soon supply jets. Training NATO tactics, cockpit procedures, and non-type specific simulators will speed up later conversion, that should be to F-16 or Gripen, and add tactical value with current types. And this is where I then said yesterday that no, that we won't provide the Tornadoes because a whole bunch of reasons put down there. But I talked about that yesterday. And then just finally on the UK Zelenskyy thing, Zelenskyy says that the UK has agreed to provide a powerful weapons package to Ukraine that includes a significant number of armored vehicles and long range weapons. Long range weapons. That's fascinating. What will that entail? We will wait to see, but that it could be that the UK provides the opportunity to change the game. We did that with the Challenger tanks, although arguably that started with the French. But we then popped along and said, no, we'll provide our main battle tanks. No other nation had done that. And that's kind of opened the door for everyone else to just go, okay, we'll provide main battle tanks. If we are the ones to start saying long range weapons, then that's good stuff. And I think UK is just in a position with Russia where it's like, yeah, whatever. You've murdered a bunch of people within UK sovereign territory, Litvinenko, Skripal. So our opinion of you, Russia, is fairly low at the moment. So yeah, main battle tanks, airplanes if we could, but long range missiles, yeah. Uh, all good. In terms of other news for aid, Portuguese Prime Minister has announced that 3 Leopard 2 tanks will be provided from their own stocks. As this kind of had Portugal walked back on their commitments to Leopards, but he said, no, they're going. 2 more Gepard anti-aircraft systems and ammo have arrived in Ukraine. So this is from the Germans and a whole bunch of other systems with big systems and stuff with big German words. But there you go. Good news because they have been useful in taking down drones and providing a network of radar. Sweden has approved $400 million of new military aid. This includes the CV90 and the Archer that we talked about before, and that's now been sort of rubber stamped. That's or officially sanctioned. These Archers are one of the best artillery systems in the world. Shoot and scoot. There are 6-wheel versions and 8-wheel versions. They can shoot up to sort of 50 kilometers, depends what ordnance you put in there. But they're the fastest firing. So I think you can fire 3 within 1 minute. And then they can all land at the same time as well, due to the change, I think, in trajectory. So you can go bang, 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 and all 3 will land at the same time. And that then disallows people to get out of the way there where it lands, and gets around sort of counter battery. So you can fire 3. Means you could arguably fire 9. I don't know whether you could do 9 in 3 minutes, and that's before counter battery can begin to get back to you. So that's 9 shells, bish bash bosh, and we're off. So that's really useful. Ghirkin's been at it again. Eagle Ghirkin, sorry, or Strokov. His analysis has been pretty critical of Russian military activity. I'll take a few bits out of what he said. Marienko, no change, sluggish frontal grind as in all other areas, rather than what Rebar saying, which is it's all fighting on the western outskirts. Based on analysis of incoming fragmentary information, the latest assault on Vuhledar was repelled with heavy losses for the units of the Russian forces Russian armed forces participating in it, which is not surprising since only cretins can be attacking head-on for many months in the same place, heavily fortified and extremely inconvenient for the attackers. Oh, wow. So that's what everyone else has been saying on the pro-Ukrainian side, which is this is insane at Vukovar, and he's now repeating that as a pro-Russian. Despite this is Vukovar, the situation on the Vukovar-Svatova front, so that's the entire front. Despite the increased victorious yelling of internet propaganda, the situation on the Donetsk front has not changed significantly over the past 2 days. But Bakhmut is still controlled by the Ukrainians. There is no operational encirclement of Bakhmut yet, since the enemy has the ability to transfer reserves and carry out supplying through and to the north of the settlement Cheziv Yar, which is a strong fortified area. And basically, yeah, more of the same. To the west, Kremlin fighting continues with varying success. This time, ours are attacking. Advancement. So actually, we'll come on to that in the frontline update. But there is some success up in the sort of Kremlin to Svatova front. But he is pretty damning, and there's lots more information in there. But I will move on. Shashant Joshi back to him says, interesting. This is a quote. We expect in the next 10 days a new huge invasion. So this has been said by the Ukrainians quite a bit over the last few days. They're expecting a massive invasion. The problem is the data for this is kind of thin on the ground. So looking at satellite imagery, we're not sure there's been a huge accumulation of Russian troops. So there's contradictory claims and data hanging around. So a Ukrainian military official speaking on condition of anonymity to talk about intelligence matters told foreign policy. However, as Jack Detch says here, Ukraine is bracing for a grisly Russian offensive in the Donbass with hundreds of thousands of troops already concentrated in the country's east. We expect the next 10 days a new huge invasion, as mentioned. But the problem is, and there's a really good War on the Rocks podcast, which I'll play some of it to you later. In the most recent War on the Rocks podcast, Michael Kaufman says he's skeptical that the Russian offensive, which he describes as having already started in effect, will really be as big as suggested by Ukrainian officials. So it's all going to be about the next 2 weeks, but the Ukrainians, I don't know whether they genuinely believe this or this is a bit of psyops, so the offensive ends up being actually a little bit underwhelming. Ukrainian officials estimate that Russian forces inside the country have surpassed the 300,000 mark. Even more conservative estimates of Russian presence in Ukraine are significantly higher than Putin's invading force. Of course, it's whether they are well enough trained and whatnot. So lots of talk there, and I'll go through that later. The Ukrainian military estimates that Russia already has 1,800 tanks, 3,950 armored vehicles, 2,700 artillery systems, 810 Soviet-era multiple launch rocket systems, 400 fighter jets, and 300 helicopters. So there's still a lot of capacity and capability in terms of equipment there. Although 1,800 tanks sounds like a lot, they supposedly, before the war started, had the ability to call on well over 10,000 tanks. It turns out that most of them have fallen apart and been cannibalized. So, take that with a pinch of salt. So we have the Seymour Hersh article, a blog article, 5,000 word one, and I reported it yesterday. I didn't really say much about it. I'm not all that. I need to think morally about this, but I don't think I'm too morally bothered about America blowing up the pipeline. That is highly controversial. But if you take a strictly consequentialist moral ethics, where the means end justifies the means, then this is really like Nord Stream needed to be stopped in some way. The consumption of Russian fossil fuels needed to stop in a significant way to stop Russia being able to weaponize fossil fuels, to weaponize energy, and to stop Russia getting all that money in to finance the war. So this was a huge advantage that Russia had. So it doesn't surprise me that people would be looking to stop that. At the end of the day, this is a proxy war. Like I've been saying this for a long time. This is a war between NATO and the West and the US and Russia, right? And it's taking place in Ukraine, and it's the Ukrainian army doing it, and soldiers and people doing it, but it's involving the rest of the world in very meaningful ways that makes it look rather like a proxy war. Now, there are arguments either way as to the Wikipedia entry is quite interesting for the pipeline sabotage. It definitely was sabotage according to the investigation by the Swedish. Interestingly, I think there have been 3 investigations of the explosions, and none of them have actually published their official results. So it does seem like there's an awful lot of operational security here. Speculation is the involvement by Russia. There are just fewer arguments to support that Russia would do this, to blow up their own pipeline, which is getting them in a load of income and money. Like it just seems more plausible that it is someone else other than Russia. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. I don't really have a horse in this race. What's really interesting is if you hate Biden and Democrats, I guess, and if you hate America, you will absolutely be singing about this Hersh article. So I found that the Americans who hate the Democrats generally say this is spot on. Uh, those who are pro-Ukrainian, who aren't so, who are kind of supportive of the American government in that way, will pick holes in this argument, in this article, and it falls along party lines. And if you're pro-Russian, you'll say, "Look, we told you so." So I don't know. You need to be. You think about your own position when you're interpreting this confirmation bias. Like I'm really not too bothered about this article, so I'll take it. I'll be fairly objective and neutral about assessing this article. But a lot of people, this falls along confirmation bias lines. So if it confirms your already held opinion, you will say this is brilliant article, and you'll use it as evidence to slag off Biden or whatever, uh, or you will cast aspersions on Hersh because actually it upsets your own narrative or whatever. So just be aware. Is basically what I'm saying. Now, people like Michael Weiss and other, really people I rely on quite a lot, great sources who obviously don't like this Hersh article are slamming it. I mean, this has been explosive, this article. Some people said, why are you spreading conspiracy theories? It's like this has been dealt with in the mainstream media and by the White House extensively yesterday. If I don't report on this article, what am I doing? Michael Weiss, the entire story is attributed to a single anonymous source, but it's also noteworthy that Hersh again refers to Ted Postel, a leading conspiracy theorist about Syrian chemical weapon use. So Hersh has got what the anti-Hersh people are saying is that he's got stuff wrong previously on the Syrian. He's been a bit of an apologist for Russia possibly before. He's excused the Syrian, so he attacked Obama's claims on the use of chemical weapons in Syria, as I understand it. And there's, he's been slammed before by people like Bellingcat and others for getting stuff wrong about that. So the idea is he's got it wrong before in a really big, serious way. So he's now saying, here's another article where he's really only depending on one source. What's the chance he's got that wrong? Which is interesting because all good journalism, you should, like, the rule of journalism is two sources. If you don't have two sources for your claims, but you can't write an article. This is what happened with the was it the Reuters guy or the Associated Press reporting on the air defense system in Poland, and they ended up having to get sacked because he only had one source and it was wrong. And the source wasn't very good. So here we've only got one source, and in fact, the source is this: according to a source with direct knowledge of the operational planning. Really, not hugely strong, to be honest here. And then Hersh elaborates to TASS, which is the Russian news source, that his source, around whom he based 5,000 words, quote, seems to know what happened. So TASS says US journalist Seymour Hersh on Wednesday reaffirmed the credibility of the source that provided him with the data to corroborate a story on US involvement in the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. Quote, it's somebody who seems to know quite a bit about what is going on, Hersh told TASS. I can't name people, obviously. This is interesting because seems is a really weak modal word here. So this is seems to know quite a bit. Where would you place that on 0 to 100% in terms of definitely a good source, definitely knows what he's talking about? I would say seems to know is probably somewhere between 50 and 60%. Yeah, he seems to know. But it's not huge. So if you're basing your article on a 50 to 60% probability, if that's how you'd interpret seems, then that could be a problem. However, this is really plausible. Like when you read the article, there's a lot of plausibility in this article, and it does make sense for this to have been done from a really global strategic point of view. As I've said before, like I think it's more plausible that non-Russian entities did this than Russia. And if it's non-Russian entities, well, who's most likely to have done it? Well, the US, realistically, with the help of allies like Norway in this case, as the article states. But there's a lot of pushback to the article. Seymour Hersh's reporting is correct that US blew up the Nord Stream pipeline is a major act of international terrorism. Uh, but Wesley Morgan here says whether or not the main claim of Hersh's Nord Stream Substack piece is correct, the level of specificity is no way to gauge a story's accuracy. So this guy here, Nathan Robson, says his account is very specific down to exactly how it was done. So therefore, it's true because it was specific. And this is actually it's quite a common thing you see in debating and arguments. People go into specifics because they think and it generally is for someone who's not very critical. If you put lots of specific minor details, it has the air of being more convincing and therefore more true. But that's not necessarily the case. So you could probably teach a unit about journalistic equivalent of precision bias. So precision bias is called, based on past details that he has got very wrong. So in the past, he's been very precise about stuff and got it wrong, Hersh. Is what I was saying before. So he's got the Syrian stuff wrong, which he loads of specified details. He's got loads of specified details here. Doesn't mean that it's correct. But that's me giving you both sides. I don't want to be a both sidesist here, but I am kind of in the middle. I don't really know. I don't know enough about the details of the article, or like I've read the article, but I don't know enough about the whole thing to cast my opinion either way. I I am somewhere in the middle. Wouldn't surprise me. There you go. What do you think? Okay, moving on. The recruitment of prisoners to the Wagner Group has been completely stopped. That's according to Prigozhin. So is that because the Russian army is now recruiting prisoners? They've now changed the rules, I think, so the Russian army can recruit prisoners. Are they trying to steal the win from the Wagner sales? Interesting. And one of the last things. So Elon Musk. I know he has a cult following, and there'll be some of you out there, many of you out there watching this, who absolutely love Elon Musk. And when I slag off Elon Musk, you get really defensive and have a go at me because I don't know, people like other people a lot, and they become a representation of their own kind of politics and thoughts and beliefs. You need to stop doing that. You need to cut. I mean, I do that, but I need to stop myself from doing that because you start doing that, that means this person that you kind of have a great respect and love for can then do things that are completely wrong and horrible, and that gets through your veto system because you like them so much that you allow them to do things that are terrible. I'm talking about this in the abstract sense. So you need to be really careful when you give. This is what I talked about this with putting. Vladimir Zelenskyy said recently, "I'm going to stop pictures being put up of me around offices around Ukraine." You shouldn't do that. Absolutely, you start hero worshipping individual people. You then can't allow for the fact that people are grey, not black and white, and they have moral complexity. So here's a case in point. Here is that Starlink have, in my opinion, been real wrong ones here. So after this is very forceful language here. After the militant Russian aligned Telegram channel KCPN published pics of an alleged Ukrainian modified drone with integrated Starlink dish, Elon Musk is now restricting Starlink services. And let's have a look at the article. So SpaceX has curbed Ukraine's use of Starlink internet for drones, the company president has said. Basically, the long and the short of it is, we gave Starlink to be used for communications only and for humanitarian aid, and et cetera, et cetera. You're using it in drones to do like droney things. That's not part of our agreement. We're going to stop doing that. So we've stopped. So using Starlink with drones went beyond the scope of an agreement SpaceX has with the Ukrainian government, Shotwell said. So Shotwell is the SpaceX president and chief operating officer. Adding the contract was intended for humanitarian purposes, such as providing broadband internet to hospitals, banks, and families affected by Russia's invasion. We know the military is using it then for comms, and that's okay. So that's outside of the contract, but that's okay. So already there's there appears to be double standards, she said, but our intent was never to have them use it for offensive purposes. SpaceX has privately shipped truckloads of Starlink terminals to Ukraine, allowing the country's military to communicate by plugging them in and connecting them with the nearly 4,000 satellites SpaceX has launched into low Earth orbit so far. So they're happy for Ukraine to spend lots of money on a monthly basis, whacking shed loads of money into Starlink. But now these are being used in drones, which actually they have been for, I presume they've been used for offensive capabilities, and communications is offensive. Like if you're communicating on what you should do, like secretly in your literally army doing an offensive. So this is completely arbitrary. And also there's the admission that basically, so I reported on the fact that SpaceX previously turned off communications during the Kherson attack, or Kherson, when the Russians withdrew from Kherson and the Ukrainians were on the offensive. They, again, I guess you could say it fits in with their contractual agreement. They turned off the communications, and then this literally cost Ukrainian lives and stopped them from being able to do the offensive for about a week. So hugely controversial. Now, Ukrainians have gone mental about this. They absolutely hate this. Like, it depends if you think, right, they shouldn't, this technology should not be used for offensive means, then you need to be really consistent about that, which is not allowed. I don't know. This is pretty tricky. The end result is you are disadvantaging or taking away the advantage that Ukraine had. And that looks very much like you're being pro-Russia here. And there's already been a history of Elon Musk having an appeasement, Putin appeasement, and a pro-Russia Russian appeasement sort of element to what he says and does. And this just builds into this. You can defend this if you think that it shouldn't be used for offensive means. Fair enough. You can go down that route. I think it gets a little bit tricky for reasons I've already talked about, and others. Possibly discuss this at a later point. But suffice to say that Ukrainians are not fans of Elon Musk at the moment, and they absolutely, there's a lot of pushback about sort of turning off their ability to use Starlink for, you know, for offensive means and for drone. It means not only drones for reconnaissance as well as drones for dropping stuff. You know, this is a real problem. Lastly, if you're a big fan of Pink Floyd, be warned. He's former Pink Floyd co-founder Roger Waters. He's shown quite a lot of pro-Russian tendencies over the last few years, and in fact, Russia have now used him to be a spokesperson to the UN. And this is really cool. In fact, the lyricist, the wife of is it Dave Gilmour of Pink Floyd, has come out and absolutely slammed him for being an anti-Semite and a pro-Russian voice. And yeah, really damning. He's proved to be super controversial. So yeah, if you're a big fan of Roger Waters, beware, because it appears that he is not on the side of the Ukrainians here. Anyway, that's the kind of news. A bit more conversational as well. Sorry about that. But yeah, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for hanging out, and check out my updates, my frontline update a little bit later.